listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome. Good morning, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to know that you're out there listening and that that I'm going to deliver a show the highest quality that's going to challenge you, that's going to make you want to reach out and face the doubts and fears that you may have in your life, and also move you forward. Anytime you're facing a new you, it takes support, it takes a community, and that's why we're here with Second Wind. I made this podcast for you. I created this podcast for you and for me because I like connecting with women that have made a difference in their lives. So thank you for being here today. Our guest today, we're going to move right into this, is a fascinating woman. Her story is so interesting, and how that history of her life growing up as a Mormon has changed her life, has affected her life in her time today. Diane Cannon Ragsdale is an author, a retired physical therapist, and a mental health advocate for survivors of abusive and dysfunctional families. Diane attended Utah State University on a dance scholarship, and then several years later received her degree from the University of Utah. In retirement, she has dedicated herself to travel and creativity. I like that. I like that a lot. Today, she lives happily in Salt Lake City, Utah, is married and a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 8 beautiful children. Loose Cannons is her first book, and that is the book of how she came to be where she is today. So welcome, Diana. It's delightful to see you here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes. Now, as I shared with you, I am very naive about the Mormon religion. And, I'm a Methodist, always been a Methodist, raised in a different faith. But we just don't hear much about the Mormons in Texas. So it'll be interesting to me, as well as to my listeners, that are you a practicing Mormon today?
No, I am not.
You are not. Okay.
No.
So, I think there was, what I know is from a movie that came. What was that movie that came? It was so interesting. Funny.
The murder.
Yes. And it was on Broadway as a play as well.
Oh, the Book of Mormon.
Yes, the Book of Mormons. Yes.
Yes.
So I remember that. But you were actually raised in the Mormon faith. So tell us a little bit about your growing years and how you were affected.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes, my father always called us liberal Mormons, which in retrospect is kind of funny. I never know really what that meant, but as I got older, I realized, it means that he didn't really want to follow all the strict rules of the Mormon church.
Okay.
So, and that they were very liberal Mormons, especially in their younger years prior to having kids, and when they were just starting their family. Both of my parents were raised very strict LDS and come from Mormon pioneer stock who, fled to Utah after being persecuted in the Midwest. So my great grandfather was George Q. Cannon, who was an apostle to Brigham Young. So big time, inextricably linked basically to the Mormon church. Yes. But my parents, as soon as they got married very young, my mother was 16, my father was 18 when they got married. And soon after they got married, they went to the Four Corners area. My father's also happens to be a genius. So he's very, very bright and was a paleontologist by the time he was 18 years old.
Oh my goodness.
So
Yes.
they moved to the Four Corners area where they basically left the church behind because they were outside of the watchful eye of their parents and everybody
Oh,
else.
yeah. Yeah.
And they did not practice Mormonism there. And in fact, they pursued a very wild, lifestyle there and ended up swinging, smoking, drinking. My brothers were serving cocktails at age 6 and 8, cocktails at
Oh.
their swinging parties. And
Mhm.
I happened to be a result of the swinging.
Mhm.
But they came back to Utah after about 2 years of that party lifestyle. I think they couldn't take it anymore. It caught
Yeah.
up with them.
Mhm.
So they came back to Salt Lake and they tried to get back into the Mormon church, but it was just difficult for them because they just weren't, I don't think their hearts were into it at all. Plus at that point they had both become so their mental illnesses really started to show up because
Oh.
of all of the pressure, I think.
Uh-huh.
And so the family just became more and more dysfunctional. That when I was 8 years old, no, I was 8 years old when my mother and father were both in and out of the psych ward in Salt Lake. And my
Wow.
mother eventually abandoned all of us when I was 8. So
Oh.
it wasn't until my father married my mother's sister, who was very
Uh-huh.
LDS, that we kind of started going back to church again.
Right.
So I was 10,
Uh-huh.
before I really had much exposure. We had gone to church a few times with my grandparents and had some exposure, but really I was 10 years old when we started going faithfully. And my stepmother, who was really my aunt, was
Mhm.
extremely LDS. And so our lives just changed overnight. We were at church every single Sunday and, got all the lessons. And for the most part, it probably saved us. I really feel like just because we finally had some normalcy, we had
Structure.
some structure, we had some, we learned morals, we had really great
Mhm.
examples of, good people to emulate. It
Mhm.
wasn't right inside my family, but
Right.
outside of the family, we had good role models, which I
Right.
really believe kind of saved us from going completely off of the deep end as
Yeah.
adults.
Well, how
So
was it? I'm so curious as to how did it just happen that both of your parents had mental problems? I mean, was that in part of their family history as well?
I mean, I've done some research and I know there is some family history of mental illness, but especially on my father's side. So my
Mhm.
father, he was diagnosed, and I didn't know this as a child, but early on
Uh-huh.
he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia
Uh-huh.
and narcissism. But later on in my own counseling, my counselor told me that was used to be a diagnosis that they would
Mhm.
label people with, but he believes he probably had bipolar
Oh,
and not necessarily paranoid schizophrenia. He did have
wow.
delusions,
Uh-huh.
big time delusions, and at one point thought the government was spying on all of us and had put chips in all of us kids' ears. And but
Oh,
but he thinks he was probably more bipolar rather than paranoid schizophrenic.
right.
But my mother, I believe, was definitely in a situation of situational depression because she lived with my father.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it was tough. So she
Yeah.
she became clinically depressed to the point where she had oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it, where they put the electrodes on your head
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
um, yeah, tried to cure her depression through electrotherapy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. They
Hmm.
used to do a lot of that, didn't they, back in
They
those
did
days?
back then. Yes.
Yes. Well, I actually know where the Four Corners area is.
Oh,
Surprise, surprise.
okay.
My family came from Perryton, Texas. So up in the Panhandle. So we would
Okay.
come and we moved to Arkansas to live. My father got a job there. And so when we go back, we would go through the Four Corners area. So I'm
Oh,
familiar
okay.
with the name. But it's
Uh-huh.
to me, it's just a little wide spot in the road, isn't it? And I can
For the most
imagine
part.
back in those years, it probably was. I know it's probably larger now, but what did your that life because in reading your going to your website, which I do want people to know about, um,
Mhm.
you talk about the struggles that you all were under as children, that the family
Mhm.
was so dysfunctional
Mhm.
and so off the wall crazy sometimes that
Mhm.
you all were pretty much left to yourself, correct?
Exactly. Right.
And you talk about um, the not having food and having to look for food, just a really bizarre um, childhood, right?
Mhm. Yes, it was.
And so all of that really has to take a toll. You know, I think my family was pretty normal, but yet in my own transition, which I divorced after 23 years with my husband,
Mhm.
there was still things that looking back, I can see the differences that his youth compared to my youth created such differences in us. And so
Mhm.
those little things that mom and dad do do affect us as we grow older,
Oh
right?
yeah. Right.
You found out you found out about this in your life as you were growing up.
Right. Right.
So you have a question here. Leaving the Mormon church included journey and experiences. What did you mean by that?
Well, it was a journey because, on one hand, I feel like having that community and having that family of the Mormon church really saved us. And we all really glommed onto that because, we
Yes.
were these little street urchins before that. And
Uh-huh.
so, and the actual teachings, made sense to us. And some of my siblings are still practicing Mormon, so they still
Oh.
hold on very tightly to that. There's only a few of us that have left.
Mhm.
And I wanted to believe in all of the doctrines and the teachings that I learned. I never really had a huge conviction, but I was
Mhm.
definitely into the community and into the people, and
Mhm.
felt loved and safe.
Mhm.
And I think I still hold on dearly to that. But
Mhm.
as I got older, my journey was realizing that it doesn't really serve me right now because there's just this constant push for striving for perfection.
Mm.
And there's so much pressure on LDS, especially women, because it's really, I mean, let's face it, a lot of Christian religions are kind of male based, and
Uh-huh.
especially in the Mormon church, if you don't
Mhm.
hold the priesthood, you're kind of the second class citizen. So the rhetoric does not fit me because I'm definitely a feminist at heart, and
Right.
I don't like to be told what to eat and drink and wear, and I'm just too much of a rebel. And I
Yes,
learned that early on about
you
myself, and
did.
just yeah, I did.
You
And
learned
it's
that trying to survive, really.
exactly, it was
Yeah,
definitely my survival tactic. So it didn't serve me. The rhetoric just doesn't fit my
yeah,
personality and in my world.
right. Yeah.
Right.
Um, so what would you say your lessons learned over the 3 divorces and 4 marriages that you had? What were those lessons?
Those lessons were even tougher learned for me.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't understand because all of my siblings went through the same stuff for the most part. And they
Mhm.
had all been in stable, loving relationships for the most part. I mean, they'd had their ups and downs, but I was the first one to get a divorce out of all. Well, I had some siblings that were estranged that I didn't really know what their lives were like.
Right.
But for the ones that had stayed close, I was the first one to go through a divorce, and then a second divorce, and a third divorce. During my third divorce, I had one sister that divorced, but really I seemed to be the one who had attachment issues and relationship issues and really struggled with that. And it took a lot of therapy for me to figure out, and with a lot of help, that of course I'm going to have attachment issues. We were abandoned
Mhm.
at age 8,
Mhm. Mhm.
and for reasons that explains in the book, I became the scapegoat. So I was the girl in the family that was the most physically abused by my father. So I
Mhm.
had trust issues for men. I
Oh,
have
yeah.
attachment issues. I put up a
Yeah.
wall just to save my, to protect myself. So
Mhm.
it took a long time for me to just understanding that alone was huge for me, because then I was able to kind of go, okay, at least now I know where the issues lie, and I can just start to work on that. And I decided for me that I didn't want to live alone, and that I'm a person who lives lovingly and
Mhm.
open-heartedly, and I
Mhm.
didn't want to have a closed heart. And so I've worked
Right.
hard to keep my heart open, and that was
Yeah.
the only way to be able to move forward from all of that for me.
Well, that was a pretty big decision. How did you make that? Did you counsel with friends? Did you have a talk with God? Did you how did you arrive that this is number 3 and I'm still dealing with the same stuff? So what
Mhm.
do I do now?
Right. Well, it came during my third divorce, and that one
Mhm.
really, really hit me hard because I was 50 years old, and I
Mhm.
was sitting here going, okay, I've been married 3 times, going on my third divorce. Um,
Mhm.
it would have been really easy for me to crawl into a hole, and I started to go down that rabbit hole of just
Yeah.
feeling bad for myself, feeling like I was such a failure. I had screwed up my kids. I had screwed so I started to go down that hole of depression, but
Mhm.
it was a very deliberate awakening that I had after crying for 2 weeks in the fetal position and
Oh,
feeling
bless your
sorry for
heart.
myself.
I
And
remember that position.
yes, yes, it
It's
was a
where we
bad
go.
time. It's
Mhm.
where we go, but I looked at my kids and what it was doing to them, and they felt so helpless to help me.
Yeah.
And it was a one day thing where I went, this isn't me. This is not
Mm.
me. I have more strength than that. I'm more resilient than that. I'm not going to live this way. I I my I've always been a very optimistic and resilient person, and
Mhm.
I wanted to be happy. I didn't want to be angry. I didn't want to be, um, sad. I just wanted to
Yeah.
be happy. And I had this beautiful life with my 3 kids at the time,
Mhm.
and starting to have grandkids, that I just decided to focus on that. And it made a huge difference. And I did get some spiritual help, and I got
Mhm.
some counseling. I went to a inner child workshop,
Oh,
and that
yeah.
helped me so much
Oh,
to
yes.
realize, yeah, that I deserved to be happy. And that was a
Uh-huh.
big moment for me.
Now, for the listener out there that is going through the same frustrations that you
Hmm.
may have experienced,
Hmm.
what was the scariest thing for you as you went through this decision? Was there fear there? Has to be some, just because you're a very strong woman. I can see that and I can hear it in the way you live your life. But
Oh,
there has to be we always do think anytime we get uncomfortable, we face that horrible fear that comes up from the depth of our bellies and causes us grief. So
right.
how did you confront that?
Well, that's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about that a whole lot, but you're right. I am a strong and resilient person, but my MO when I'm afraid, I learned this when I was in my 50s, so a lot later than I should have or would have liked to have.
No,
But
you were right on time, right
oh,
on time.
good, good. Oh, thank you. That's so
Yes.
nice to hear. So my thing, what I do when I'm afraid and scared, and I didn't realize this, is that I get angry.
Ah.
Because
Mm.
yeah, I think that's how I react to fear, instead of being like doing what a lot of people would do, is recognizing the fear
Mhm.
and addressing that. I get angry, so I had to address the anger issues that I had,
Oh, uh-huh.
and I did that through a lot of counseling, and just the fact of recognizing that's what
That's
happens
your
when I am
response.
afraid. Hmm.
Mhm.
But the biggest thing that caused me fear was to lose my kids and to lose my family, and because of my own abandonment issues, I was not
Oh,
willing to
yeah.
do that no matter what. My
Yeah.
kids were my lifeline, and anything that
Mhm.
happens to me, I consider them.
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Right. So
Mhm.
how long were the years, uh, how many years were you in this growing stage before you met your husband and became a wife?
A wife again for the fourth
A
time.
wife again.
Yeah, no, I wasn't going to do it again. I had decided that after divorce number 3, that was it. I must not be marriage material. I'm just going to, live my life and focus on my kids and my
Yeah.
career, and I knew I could be happy doing that. So I think just letting go for me, the fact
Mhm.
that I had to be in a relationship and that
Mhm.
I needed to be married, because again, this talk in my head of, families, and you've got to be a good wife, and you've got, people aren't supposed to be alone, and
Right.
I had all these conversations in my head. And I once I let go of feeling like I needed to be in a relationship,
Uh-huh.
I I just kind of had this really spiritual epiphany of, I love myself. I love being alone. I have this beautiful life and I can do this. And I didn't date for a good year and a half,
Mhm.
which was the first time in my life. And that
Mhm.
gave me time to do a lot of reflection, a lot of counseling. I journaled. I, just spent a lot of time with myself, which was important.
Mhm.
And then I had a friend of mine who hooked me up with a local dating website, because I was a little nervous about dating again because, like I said, I didn't want to get married again. But,
Right.
I live in the most conservative state in the union, and to just either not be married and date or shack up with somebody was, still something. And this was only 15 years ago
Right.
that was kind of frowned upon. So I decided to start dating again through this local dating service, it was for professionals. You had to pay to invest in it,
Mhm.
and I only went on like one date a month, which was perfect because I was busy. I didn't have a whole lot of time to date, nor did I really want to.
Right. Right.
So I had only met a couple of guys before I met my husband, and we went on one date, and we've never spent a day apart since. It was just
Oh my gosh.
it
That's
was the
amazing.
weirdest. It was amazing. And I told him, I said, I'm not ever getting married again. We're just going to hang out. We're going to be companions. We'll travel. We can have fun. but, but
And he
he
just
kind of,
sat there and nodded, "Yes, okay."
exactly, whatever. But we both really, it was one of those weird, kind of love. I just trusted him from the very second I met him, which was
Oh, that's
huge.
wonderful. That is
Yeah,
huge.
it's huge.
Rebuilding that
And
trust is big.
it
Yeah.
was big. Yeah, I just knew he was safe. And then I told him, I said, I'm not getting married again. And so we dated for about a year and a half. He proposed about 6 weeks after we started dating. And I said,
Oh.
remember, we're not getting married, but slowly over time, we talked a lot about it. And he just really, really wanted to be married. And I didn't
Mhm.
want to lose him. So we
Right.
married in 2010. And we've
Yes.
been married since and blended our families beautifully. And I just couldn't be happier.
Oh, that's wonderful. So
Yeah,
now your family is made up of 5 children, right?
right.
What's the sex on those?
So
2?
my husband has 2 kids, and he has, his oldest is a boy, and then he has a daughter,
Uh-huh.
and they're in their, let's see, early 40s and late 30s. And then my kids, my oldest is a daughter, and
Mhm.
then I have a son and then a daughter, and
Oh,
they're all in
wonderful.
their early 40s and 30s. And
Yeah.
here's the other really, really unexpected bonus. Our kids are really, really close. Like, we didn't even raise them together,
Oh,
and they
wonderful.
do things outside of us even knowing about it. They get in touch with each other, they babysit each other's kids.
Oh,
We
that's
can
wonderful.
all get together, and it's like we've been together for 30 years. That was completely unexpected. So
Right.
that's
Yeah,
a huge
that's great.
bonus. Yeah, they're wonderful.
Well, it just, I think, goes to how successfully you combined your unions, that they can
Yes.
feel
Well,
so
thank
safe
you.
about the union being strong.
Yeah. Yep. I think
I
so.
would say that. But
Yeah.
I now we are here. You've been very kind to share your history, but there was something that you learned through your mother, and it led you to write your book. And the name of your book is Loose
Loose Cannons.
Cannons,
Hmm.
a memoir.
Hmm.
Um, so tell us about that because it just in your description of it, I'm just like, I want this book. I want to read this book because it's going to be fun and shocking and full
Hmm.
of uh, lots of interesting things.
Yep.
So how did that relationship renew itself and how did the book come to be?
Oh, well, it was such an important thing that happened. So for about 20 years, I've wanted to write this book for a really long time, but I haven't been in the place to be able to do it. In my
Mhm.
relationships, my ex-husbands, when I talk about it, they would be very threatened by it because
Yeah.
it's a lot to put your life out there.
Mhm.
And, it was just not something that it was the right timing at the time. So it's been in the back of my head for a really long time. So about Oh, I've had a really on and off relationship with my mom since, of course, she left us when I was 8. I didn't see her again until I was 12. And
Mm,
then after that, it was I'd see her once a year and she'd come and take us to lunch. So I was angry with her.
right.
Um, I didn't know her, I didn't understand her. And to me, she seemed very selfish that she could leave her kids.
Right.
It took me years and years and years to kind of understand why she had to leave. But about 3 years before I decided to really get serious and write the book, this would have been in about 2012 or 13,
Mhm.
I decided to commit to try to get to know her, to really, really try to get to know her because she had tried to talk to us kids and be honest about her side of the story.
Uh-huh.
And I was so shut off and turned off by her with her by then that I wasn't being open minded at all. And so I decided to really, really listen to her and see what she had to say for herself. And so my sisters and I decided to go see her every single year, at least once a year, and stay for a few days. And she'd bring out all these old pictures. And we knew she journaled, but we didn't have any idea how much she journaled
Uh-huh.
until it was, and again, we had been reconnected for about 2 or 3 years. So we'd really gotten close.
Mhm.
And it was when she got really sick and knew she was probably going to pass away soon she knew that I had the desire to write the book. So she
Oh.
pulled me aside and said, when I die, I have journals in my headboard. She had this big headboard, one of those ones with the
Oh,
Rolodex, you know,
yes. Uh-huh.
opening. And
Uh-huh.
she said, I want you to go get those journals before anybody else gets to them. And you need to have those for your book. So
Oh.
she got put on hospice. We got to say our goodbyes. We ended on great terms. And then the minute she passed away, almost, my sister and I drove to her house. And that was the first thing I did was box all those journals up, had them sent to my house in Salt Lake. And I've
Uh,
read every single one 2 or 3 times. She had 35 journals that she
wow.
had, and that was her way of doing her own therapy and
Oh,
healing
yeah.
through all
Yeah.
those years. But it was just a treasure trove of for me of just not only just timeline and what her side of the story is, but it just made it even more important that I tell my story because yeah, her story is even more fascinating than mine, and her voice in her writings is just incredible.
Oh, so she was
So
a good
oh,
writer
she
as
was a
well.
beautiful writer. She was taking classes and she had written poetry and
Oh.
published poetry.
Oh,
But
really?
she had written all these journals, and yeah, I had to weave them into the book because her writing is just so beautiful and her voice, and
Oh.
it's just so honest, and some of it's really, really tough to read, but just so authentic and raw. And yeah, I
I can
really appreciate
imagine
that.
for you reading it was very had its pain and its joys. Um,
Hmm.
how would somebody not connected as you were to your mother find your book?
uh how would somebody
Interesting, funny, heart-wrenching at times,
I'm getting
all of the
all of that
emotions,
feedback, all of that
right?
feedback. So yeah, I see somebody every single day that stops me and says, I laughed out loud at some of the, stuff in your book, but I would say the first third of the book is tough to read. It's the really emotional, just all the trauma that we all
Mhm.
went through as kids. But then it goes through these phases of, you know, joyous, great
Mhm.
family experiences, great
Mm.
connection.
Mhm.
But I have had people say they cried and they laughed, um, and I've had people say that they resonate with this story because, most of us come from some
Oh,
form of dysfunctional family.
yes.
And
Right.
so a lot of people are able to relate to it. And, I'm
Right.
hoping that's the case.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Warren Driggs
Hmm.
wrote this or said this. Loose Cannons is an unforgettable memoir, a remarkable and astonishing story, which will leave you laughing, crying, and cringing until the last page. Now, he is the author of Mormon Boy, Swimming in Deep Water, a novel of Joseph Smith. Oh, wait.
Hmm.
Is he?
Hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Hmm.
A Tortoise in the Road.
Hmm.
So, how did you meet Warren?
Warren and I met in St. George, Utah, through some common friends.
Mhm.
And I found out that he had written these books. I bought all three of them and devoured them.
Ah,
And he was just his books are funny and yet very, very telling, and very relatable to me anyway, especially because
mhm.
he's from Utah and Salt Lake also. But
Right.
he was just so encouraging to me to keep writing my stories, and shared his experiences with writing and publishing. So we've become good friends. But yeah,
Mhm.
his books are also very good. He's a
Mm,
very talented person.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that was a nice endorsement of your book.
it was
Yes.
indeed. I appreciated that.
Yes, of course. Now, do you get any have you ever had any repercussion from the church on the writing of the book or questions or anything like
And
that?
interestingly, no, I thought I would,
Yeah.
especially because yeah, I was worried that that I would be called out on, because I do divulge quite a bit about the temple ceremonies and what goes on
Oh,
in the temple, which is a
yes.
no-no.
Mhm,
But for
mhm.
me, it was important to talk about it because it did directly affect me, and I'm one of those that through writing this book, I've decided I don't like secrets, and I like transparency. So for me, it was important for me to be transparent about everything, and that included the temple
Right.
ceremonies, because I wrote about it because it was everything I wished I had known before I had gone through the temple. So
Oh. Mhm.
I thought I would suffer some backlash on that. The
Mhm.
only the only backlash I've suffered has been from my sisters, who are still very connected to
Oh.
the church, and they were a little bit upset with me about doing that. But once I told them that it's all out there anyway on the internet, that you can find out all of it now. I'm not the first one to divulge all of this, but I have not suffered any backlash from anybody high up in the church. I'm kind of a
Mhm.
small potato in the whole sea of Mormons, so I
Right.
don't think I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's
yeah,
interesting that there that must have relaxed over the years as more and more people did leave the church and
hmm,
um, make statements and so forth. I've
right.
always wanted to go listen to that choir. The
Oh, and they are
Mormon.
phenomenal.
I know.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
So
When you're in Salt Lake, you'll have to come and do that.
okay. I'm not there very much.
I'm
So,
sure.
but I'd like for you to share, if you will, what the life lessons you learned from growing up in a family that was dysfunctional.
Well, I've learned to be a survivor, and I 100% believe that a person is born with resilience or not. And I
Mm,
just feel like I got lucky, and I'm so grateful for that, because I think it's kept me strong and survived a lot of things. But the lessons I've learned is that I think we have choices in our lives on how we want to relate to people because of our experiences,
mhm,
if we want to shut down or if we want to live open heartedly, or if we want to be sad or angry, or do we want to be happy, and, just live a full life. And I think those are choices along the way. I, I've, yeah, I've always just tried to choose the optimistic, things in life. And
Mhm.
I do want to be happy, and I want my kids to be happy and fulfilled and feel
Mhm.
loved and safe. And I think of course we all want that, but somewhere along the line I feel like I've made those choices, because it I've come to many crossroads in my life where
Yeah.
I've had to make that choice. Do I want to
Yeah.
be pissed off at this guy forever, or do I want to be angry with my dad? No, he was sick. This isn't I don't
Mhm.
blame anybody or the church or anybody for any of my chaos.
Mhm.
The systems are broken, families are broken. My parents were sick, they did the best they could. I know they loved me as best as they could.
Right.
And so it's just a choice of, forgiving them and forgiving myself, and learning that, we deserve happiness if that's what we want.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
It is interesting. I do believe some people are born with a more open heart or more
Hmm.
um, um, desire to question. Is this
Hmm.
the way I have to be? How
Right.
can I change this?
Hmm.
What do I want my life to look like? How do I start? When do I start?
Right.
All of those questions that would push us into a different personality.
Hmm.
And some do that easier than others, I must admit.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so too.
I bet you're a woman that also searches a lot. When there's any when there's an idea that you want to do something, you probably research it, correct?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, I'm a researcher. Hmm.
Yeah. I knew that.
Yep, yep. That's why it took me 7 years to write this book, because I researched everything and I interviewed everybody in the family that was willing to be interviewed. And I have multiple recordings and notes all over the place. I looked like a crazy person in my house because there were post-it notes everywhere, and
Mhm.
whiteboards. And yeah, it was definitely a journey of research to come to
So
this
how long
final
did it take you to write your book?
7 years.
7 years.
Hmm.
Why did it take 7 years?
Well, I had to take some breaks along the way.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I had to take some breaks. It was hard. It was a
Yeah.
lot harder than I thought it was going to be emotionally.
Emotionally, yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
the easier part was actually telling my parents' story. It was really easy to air their dirty laundry, but when it
Yes.
came down to airing my own,
Oh, yes.
it was a lot harder. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I had to take a lot of breaks along the way, just emotionally, to just, check in, or just, I'd go see my counselor for a while.
Mhm.
I'm still learning things that I didn't even know about that aren't in the book, to
Oh.
this day, about my family. So, there was one thing that I learned along the way about 2 years ago. The book was pretty much done and I decided not to add it in, but I had to
Mhm.
get myself back into counseling because I was so mad again at my dad, and like,
Mm.
he's been dead for 7 years and I'm still mad at him. That's silly. But
Sometimes we can't help it.
yeah, it came up.
It
It came
just
up
comes
for
up.
me. Yep, yep. So that
Yeah.
happened a lot throughout the process. Plus I'm, in a fairly new marriage and new kids, and we're busy, and I didn't want to, completely abandon everybody for this book.
Well, you said you like to travel, and
Hmm.
I love that you like to. So, when you travel, where do you travel? For adventure, for just seeing a new area of the world, or how do you travel? What
Yeah, well, my
calls
husband and
you?
I both love to travel, so we kind of agree on places. We both have had kind of our separate bucket lists, and it
Mm.
works out nicely that, most of those places mesh. He is a sailor, so we
Mm.
first started traveling a lot on his sailboat
Yes.
and just had a blast with that. And we were up in the Straits of Juan de Fuca and in the Pacific Northwest a lot, which was
Mhm.
was where his boat was.
Uh-huh.
And I had never really traveled to that area. but then, and he had traveled a lot for work, but
Uh-huh.
so he wanted to do a different kind of travel and travel for pleasure. So our thing is we go places where the food's good and and it
Yes.
cultures that we're interested in. I'm so interested in other cultures and how other
Uh-huh.
people in the world live because I grew up in such a small bubble, and so did he really.
Mhm.
And so I love learning about people and their cultures and their religions and the food. And I'm a dancer, so I like to always, kind of like go explore the art world and anything creatively. And I love to
Mhm.
explore what the cultural drinks are that pair well with the food. And I just like
Mhm.
to experience everything that I can about travel. So
Right.
we've
There's a
been to
lot of
Europe
beautiful
and
lot of beautiful places out there.
hmm
Um, I can imagine, was there any reaction that you had once you realized it was just a matter of saying where or what, or making those decisions about, well, if I can go anywhere, where do I want to go? Or was that question asked?
Yeah, yeah. No, I ask myself that all the time. Where are we gonna go next? Where, if money was no object, which it is,
Yes. Yes.
but if there were no restrictions at all, where would I want to go and why?
Right.
And yeah, I tend to gravitate towards um, you know, very extremely different cultures than what I was raised in.
Mhm.
So and my husband's kind of the same way.
Mhm.
So we will usually pick 2 or 3 places a year and
Mhm.
decide on them together where we want to go. And a lot of times we like to travel with friends. And we've
Uh-huh.
both picked up golf, so it usually
Oh
involves
dear, that'll slow
golf.
you down.
I know it does slow you down. Got to fit in around a golf.
Yeah, it takes a little
So
longer to do the greens. Yeah.
exactly. So sometimes our trips are, focused on friends and golf and that kind of thing. But when it's just Kelly and I, we like to pick some place where the food's really good and
Yeah.
and if we love beaches, a lot of times we love to go someplace tropical and put our
Right.
feet in the sand and just relax and get out of chaos.
Yes. Well, I'll recommend a place to you if you've not been there, is
Okay.
Santa Fe, New Mexico,
I That's on my list too.
and
My
it's
brother
very
just got back.
close.
Yes. So
Yes.
close. Yes. No, for art and everything. I've heard that's just amazing. So that's definitely on the list
Yes.
and very
Um,
easy to get to.
I love the the Indians are very alive there and
Mhm.
very
Mhm.
active, and, um, that's been a important place for me for many years. It's just like you reconnect with the universe when you're there. For
Mhm.
me,
Mhm.
for me.
I love
So
that.
I'm
Yeah.
going next week. I'll look around and see if you're
Oh,
there.
nice. Let me think. What's next week?
Yeah, what's happening? Yes, so, I mean, this is the opera season out there. Now, I know nothing
Yes.
about opera, but I love music, so one
Yes.
can sit and listen.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I think that sounds I have a friend that goes every year to the opera to Santa
Mhm.
Fe and loves it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
love the Native American history too, so I think I need to
Mhm.
make that happen.
Well, when you go, call me, and I've got
I
some
will.
suggestions.
I would love that. I would love
That'll
that.
be
I
a
will do that.
reference for you.
Awesome.
Well, we are coming to the end of our time together, and I knew this would go very quickly
Me
because
too.
I just knew in our visits that we had prior to our talking, which were kind of sporadic, but we're here today, aren't we? And
Yes, we
so
are.
um, there's one thing I always like to ask my guests, and if I may, I'd like to
Mhm.
ask that. What is the most successful belief that you have been able to do in your life? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. My core belief of my success is my kids and my family.
Mhm.
And I'm a person of relationships, and that's my whole world. They are my world, and I work very hard and deliberately at having a very good relationship with my kids and my grandkids. And this
Mhm.
book will hopefully be a good legacy for them.
Oh,
And
yes.
yeah, I just hope that they know how much they mean to me and how much I care about them. That's my big belief in life.
Oh, that's beautiful. Really
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that you took the time, you connected, and I got to spend some time with you sharing with my audience. So thank you very much for being on Second Wind.
I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you.
Mhm. Now, listeners, I really, as always, say and believe there is a friend out there that could benefit so much from listening to Diana's story. You know, we don't always get to pick our families. And when you do go through or live with situations that are difficult, challenging, it's so important to know there are others that have survived, that they've been strong, that they know they have options, and their life is determined by them, not their history. I think it's a really great opportunity for you to share. So, again, I ask you, share this podcast so others can know Diana's story. Diana Cannon Ragsdale is her name, and you will have done a friend a very good turn here. So, that's all I ask for you to do this week. Just one little thing. So, I do thank you for being here on Second Wind. I look forward to talking to you next week. And be sure to remember to share. Enjoy your week. Make decisions. Maybe you need to make the decision about where do I want to travel next? Or what am I putting up with that I need to decide to stop? These are all your questions. So take time for yourself, love yourself, and have a great week. Thank you for being here. Bye.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.